Grab your journal. It is time. It's time right now to start to plan your garden. Now, I know it's cold outside. Some of you all are probably still in knee-deep snow, but this is the time to plan your garden. The more and the better you plan your garden now, the more productive and the better garden you'll have come spring. It does not matter if you are new to gardening or a seasoned gardener or somewhere in between. I like to actually consider myself somewhere in between. Planning a garden is crucial for a successful garden. Anything that you're doing in life in general, the more you plan, the better it'll be. I don't know if you all have heard, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So therefore, now is the time. So I'm going to give you 10 steps that I do each year, year after year after year. And that's another thing. When it comes to planning your garden, it's not a one-time deal. It's not just plan it today. I've planned my garden. This is what I'm going to be doing year after year. It takes planning every single year. And your downtime, your winter time, when things are not growing abundantly, wherever and whatever time of winter it may be where you live or whatever zone you're in, your downtime. If you don't do a fall garden, that may be the time you want to start planning for next spring. There's no specific time, but winter seems to be the most abundant time for most of us that is crucial for us to plan our garden so we can have a successful garden next year. Okay, step one. Again, grab your journal. And it's best to do it in a journal and not just on a piece of paper, because next year you can look back and see how you planned it for this year and determine what was successful, what may you need to change or add to it or take away from it. So step one, write down all, and I do mean all, and yes, you could have a very long list of all the fruits, vegetables, and herbs that you would like to plant. I didn't say like to eat. That you would like to plant. For this list, it doesn't matter if you like it, your family likes it, you're going to eat it or whatever. It's what you want to plant. Sometimes we want to plant things because we want to see how it grows or we've never had it before, so we want to taste it. Something like that. Think of this list as a birthday wish list or a Christmas wish list. You know, you ask your kids, what do you want for Christmas? Or someone may ask you, what do you want for your birthday? And you might say one or two things, but you might have this long list. Or in your head, you might say, oh man, I'd love to have this, and this. That's the type of list you want. That's step number one. Now, once you have that list, step number two, break your first list down. You want to break it down into a smaller list. Things on your list that may be family favorites. Things on your list that maybe you want to grow for its nutritional or its health value, medicinal plants. You want to break the list down. You also break it down to sometimes we grow certain things that we just want to preserve. Maybe it's something medicinal and we know we're not going to really use it a lot now, but we want to preserve it. Or it could be a bean or a fruit or something that we're going to can, and we know that we may not want it right now or something we may not want often, but it goes for the same breakdown of list, things you want to preserve. And in this list, take off and break into a smaller group the plants that you absolutely want to grow and the variety. It could be a special tomato and you're like, okay, I definitely want to grow tomatoes and this variety. That should be a compartmentalized list. Step number three, the design of your garden. You may have a plotted out area that you garden in, but that doesn't mean that you're going to garden the same way each and every year, because there are several plants that need to move. Okay, wherever you may have had your tomato plants or your pepper plants, maybe you need to move those to the other side because you don't want to plant in the same place because of pest and disease. You need to move those to a different area. In my case, I use different pots. Pots that I planted certain things in this year will not go in those same pots next year. And for me, anyone that's growing in containers, I also count the number of containers I have because for whatever reason, every year I end up with more containers. Either I buy them, someone gifts them to me, or there's some type of collab, whatever. I end up with more pots. There are some pots that I have determined things don't grow in as well as other types of pots. And so I'll take those pots out. This year, I actually am taking away a couple of pots that I'm not ready to use again. So I need to count all of my pots and the size. And for me, I also count the color, like how many red ones do I have, because that's a certain size. How many of the large brown ones do I have? Again, that's a certain size. Step number 4. Now, step number 4, I go back a little bit, because now that I have how many pots I have and the sizes, I need to break that down to according to how many pots I have to make sure I have enough plants that I want to plant in each size and each type of pot. So for you, if you're gardening in the ground, you still want to go back to that list. Okay, do I have a row of corn? My corn is going to be tall. So last year I put it on the back row. Okay. If corn is something that you need to move, maybe this year you can put it on the sides. If you're gardening in a square, if you're just gardening around your yard, maybe you had it on the east this year, you're going to have it on the west, the south, the north. So you have to go back once you know your space. And like for me, like I said, I go back and count my containers. For you, you want to go back and look at your space. Measure it out if you need to. Maybe you found that, oh, I can extend my garden by 2 feet. You'd be amazed at what you can grow in just 2 more feet. Or, you know what? My garden was a little bit too big last year for me. I want to condense it. So then you go back to make sure that you have enough plants or not too many plants for the size and the design of your garden. Step number 5, back to the list again. Break it down into cool weather crops, warm weather crops, hot weather crops, drought tolerant crops, so that you'll know how many you have. Because if it's cool weather, you might want to start planting it in February, because by the time July comes, you'll have harvested it and it's still cool. And I'm just saying February, I know it's still cold. It's still cold some places, other places it may not be. So you have to go by your zone, or you may skip the summer with those and you may say, okay, you know what? I got this patch over here because I want my cool weather crops here. But right now I can grow something that'll grow quickly and it'll be in and out before it's time for my cool weather crops. So break it down. You got cool weather crops, warm weather crops, hot weather crops, drought tolerant, those that can't stand frost. Break it down. Back to the list. That first list is just crucial, okay? You're going to take this list down and then it's time for you to do your research. Yep, you got homework. You got homework. You got to do your research. You need to find out companion plants. And then you need to decide what are you going to plant with what. And I'm going to tell you something. Companion plants, I found out myself, is by far the best way to grow. So this year, I'm going to be doing more companion planting than I've ever done before, because for years, I could not get sage to grow. I don't care what variety it was. I don't care what I did to it. I don't care where I planted. I don't care what I did to it. I could not get sage. It's 20 something degrees outside right now, and my sage is still out there. Why? Because I companion planted it. It kept saying it grows well through with rosemary. So I said, okay, you know what? I have tried everything else. Let me stick the sage in here with this rosemary. And I got a big jar when I dehydrated it. And then I ground it up so that it would be ground sage for like dressing or something like that, or herbs. Anyway, I got a huge jar of it. And I still got some out there. I went out and clipped some the other day to use the fresh. And it's been below freezing. My sage is still out there. I'm waiting to see, is this same sage going to really stay and really grow next year? Because I put it with the rosemary. So next year, companion planting is at the top of my list. I'm going to write down everything I am planting, and then I need to see what goes with what. And that's the way I'll be planting my garden. Step number 7, make sure, and this kind of goes back to a previous step, but make sure when you're planning out everything, you figure out what plants need to be rotated. That's crucial too, because if you plant something right behind it, peppers behind peppers, I say that because that's been my biggest thing. Peppers behind peppers, tomatoes behind tomatoes, they don't always do well. And it's weird because you think to yourself, man, I got a fantastic harvest this year. I can't wait to plant again. And you do it and you barely get a few. And you're like, well, what happened? I did the same thing. No, you planted it in the same spot you planted it before. So make sure you know what crops need to be rotated. Step number 8, I make a final diagram. I actually draw out, like I'll draw a circle for my red pots, a rectangle for my brown pots, and I will write in there what plant goes in what pot. All right. I actually draw out a diagram, and then I make copies of that diagram so that I can keep one outside I can keep one inside. I can have one to scratch off on, and I can have one just for a number of things. I make maybe about 5 or 6 copies. That way I have one copy that I tuck away. It's the original one, so I'll know where I started, what I need to do, and if I scratch off and make some changes and like, no, I don't want that. And yes, I've used pencil and eraser, but still, you need that original one. So that's typically what I'll do, is make copies of it so that I can have it. Step number 9, on this same diagram, I will also write time to plant, days to germinate, time to harvest. And yes, you can put all that in your journal, but it is amazing to have a sheet of paper. And I usually do this. I do it very small. I'm not writing very large. I'll use like a piece of copy paper. And sometimes I've needed to, and I've taped them together. And then when I'm finished, I just fold it in half, but I'll tape it together so that I can have a larger piece for a diagram. And if I'm right in there, like say I have this red pot and I'm going to put, Roma tomatoes, can't think of anything right now, Roma tomatoes in there, I will put, if there's a specific variety, I'll write the variety on there, and I will write time to harvest, right before the frost, 10 days to germinate, 90 days to harvest, or whatever it may be on there. So I can always refer back to that diagram. Number 10, follow the map when it's time to plant and have fun. That is the biggest thing of it all. Enjoy your garden. Your garden should be a place of peace and serenity. So design it the way you want it to design, but follow the map. All right. And an extra tip, once I have everything all written out on my map, and I have my diagram, have my red pots, and I'll show you the map once I get mine done for this year. I will have everything done. I will go in and I will rewrite it in my journal. I don't draw the diagram, but I'll put in here, like on a line, I'll say like a red pot, tomatoes, Roma, harvest, germination. Time to plant, germination time, and harvest time. I'll write that, next pot, write that, next pot, write that. And also in your journal and on your map, make sure at the top of it, somewhere or not anywhere, make sure you have on there the year 2025, 2024, 2026. Right at the beginning of your list in your journal, 2025 garden, so that you'll know that was the garden for that year. Once your journal starts becoming full, this is my second journal, my other one filled up. Once your journal becomes full, you'll be able to look back, all right? And then in your journal, after you've written out your complete list like that, the pots, and if you're not growing in containers, do it in the garden, southeast corner, middle of garden, whatever identification you can make to know where it is, write that, then write what you planted, same thing, planting time, germination time, harvest time, all right? Then when you're finished with that, leave at least 2 pages, front and back, at the end of that list. Do not write on it. When your plant is finished, each plant, go into the blank pages. Write the heading of that on that first page, results, okay? You're going to write Roma tomato, overflowed, okay? You're going to write Roma tomato, did not produce, whatever happened, or Roma tomato, overflowed, but had a ton of hornworms. Roma tomato, did not produce, had disease and pest. Write down the disease and pest. That's what the 2 pages are for, okay? Now, I'm saying 2 pages for the results. That's just going to depend on how big your garden is. Typically, front and back, I can do that with the size of my garden. But if you got a ranch, or you got a farm or a homestead, you own an acre, you may need a whole nother book for it. I'm just saying. Depends on how much you are growing, all right? Don't forget to check out my other channels, Cooking at Pam's Place, Pam's POV, and Pam's Pop-Ups. Take a second and subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 100,000 subscribers together. I'm Pam. This is Zone 8A. Anywhere you can sit a pot, you can grow a plant.